All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Legacy Tour. We are in the semifinals, where Christopher Kucera is paired up. Playing Esper Stoneblade is paired up against Josh Burgoa on Infect. So this can be a tough matchup for Infect because the Stoneblade deck is running um, Lingering Souls, which is a very good blocker against most of Infect's creatures, and it also Stoneblade comes equipped with a set of Swords to Plowshares and Thought Seizes. So it's sort of all the pieces you want when paired up. Now, one advantage for Josh is that he is on the play here, and that goes a long way. All right, yeah, I was just confirming, and yes, in fact, Josh is the higher seed, and that is huge in this matchup for the Infect player to be able to get off to a faster start and maybe put a lot of pressure on the Stoneblade deck to try and come up with answers. Now these Stoneblade decks are usually a little mana intensive as well, so some of their spells like Supreme Verdict, counter just straight counter spell. Um, and some of those things aren't as effective because Infect gets to utilize days and just the speed of their deck to good effect. Trying to find the deck lists here. All right, there's Josh's and Chris's. All right, we have the deck lists, and I'm just gonna do a quick perusal. I want to see what exactly Chris has because these Esper lists can vary a little bit. He also has an intuition, a couple Jace the Mind Sculptors. Yeah, like I was saying earlier, these are some slow answers. Um, Now, one sort of saving grace is that the quad set of Swords to Plowshares, when paired with True Name Nemesis, I'm sorry, not True Name, Stoneforge Mystic with Jite and Snapcaster Mage to sort of answer all of the creatures in a pretty timely fashion, goes a long way towards shoring up some of Chris's deficiencies. And we will, well, we'll just have to see what their draws look like and how this goes. Not a great view of Josh's hand. I'm pretty sure I saw at least one land, so. And Chris's hand has 3 lands, a Force of Will, maybe a Council's Judgment. Not the fastest, but it's serviceable, especially with that Brainstorm, being able to swap out for some more powerful spells. Or more effective spells, I shouldn't say more powerful. Council's Judgment's extremely powerful. Quick look at the comment feed here. Apparently, D Rocker 23 or Drocker, probably D Rocker. Anyway, apparently he's a big fan of Josh and he's rooting for him here. So it's good to know we have fans of the local players, or if not local, at least fans of these players, uh, watching the stream and cheering on their favorites. Um, hey, at the risk of sounding biased, I'm a huge fan of Infect as well. So I'm gonna secretly root for him. Josh opens up on a Gitaxian Probe, shows a hand of Force of Will, Council's Judgment, Brainstorm, Flooded Strand, Island Swamp, Tundra. So it is very likely, I think, that if Josh has some sort of permission like a Daze or a Spell Pierce, he will try and use that on the Brainstorm to keep Chris's hand sort of clogged up with non useful spells. Now there is a Ponder for Josh. Um, Maybe he can use this to good effect to sort of reset his own hand. I think one of the cards is a look to be a forest, basic forest. Um, that's one thing I don't think these Stoneblade decks run is any. Yeah, they don't have any wastelands, so you don't have to worry about that. Your Inkmoth Nexi are safe. I didn't get a look at what else was in that ponder. Um, like I said, I know I saw forest, so it's like Josh is really deliberating on this one. This is a, sort of, in my opinion, sort of a show of weakness in the hand. There must be some aspect of it that's missing. Typically, that's an early creature play, but we'll have to wait and see. Looks like Chris's draw another land, maybe. Not sure. No, there was a blighted agent in Josh's hand, and there's an Inkmoth Nexus. So this is the way you'd like it to go with Infect. You just play some early creatures, and I suspect he may be holding back on that blighted agent for counter magic. We'll see what Josh is able to come up with. Get the Infect counter out on the table. Looks like Josh's hand may have a. There's another fetch land. He did in fact draw the basic forest. I think we're going to see Josh deploy a blighted agent here. Yeah. So really, what he was doing, he didn't play it last turn because he didn't want to walk it into a removal spell, and Chris is probably going to have to attempt a Swords to Plowshares at some point. Now, it's arguable that maybe Josh should just let the plow hit his blighted agent. He's not really under any pressure, and I don't see a whole lot of reason to throw out some of your permission and your spells trying to protect a singleton creature when you're a little constrained on mana. It's probably better to just pick a different fight later with Inkmoth or a Glistener Elf or something like that. Now, that said, Blighted Agent is one of your better creatures, so you may want to, if there is a creature to fight over at some point, this is definitely one of them, especially when Chris has the potential of drawing into something like a Lingering Souls later on. Kucera falls to 19 as well, digs up a Tundra for himself. This is on the upkeep. That's a little trick you don't see in modern, where players in Legacy, because of how dual lands work, not having to enter the battlefield tapped or like the Shockland problem is, you can actually fetch on your own upkeep when your mana's available, so cards like Stifle don't get you as badly. It's possible Chris may go for a Council's Judgment at some point here, or maybe he's confident that Josh's hand is soft enough that he doesn't have to fight now. Looks like Josh's draw was a Brainstorm, which is almost certainly a good here because that forest isn't going to do a lot of work, I can't imagine, and might be nice to swap out some cards and get a different get a different threat. I'm sorry, get some pump spells for his threat. Josh is opting to swing just for one point of poison damage, and just sending the turn back. Yeah, no land play or anything. End of turn Brainstorm from Kucera. Looks like he has found a Ponder, a Force of Will, and a Vendilion Click. All decent draws. These are the kinds of cards he's going to need to start both applying pressure and to fight over the spells, the pump spells, and so on. But it would really behoove Chris to find some action, some aggression here. He could really use a Lingering Souls, or even better would be a Stoneforge Mystic, so he could go find a Jite. Jite is sort of a a death knell for the Infect deck, as all of its creatures are 1/1s, and an active GT just takes them all down then. Chris finds himself a scrubland, and that was a True Name Nemesis, I think. So he's got a grip full of blue cards, Force of Wills and True Names and what have you, but he opts not to go fighting over anything just now. Now what Josh needs to do, or what would be ideal, is for him to find some pump spells and something to like press his advantage a little bit. Looks like he did find a wasteland, although I don't know that that's that's what he's absolutely looking for right now. I think he's very likely to get Vendilion clicked in his upkeep, and hmm, I'm sorry, not in his upkeep. It would be in his draw step. But regardless, Chris is almost certainly planning to do that. I think just to see what's up with the Infect player's hand and sort of plan his game accordingly. Maybe not. He's just gonna let Josh go to the main phase now, where I think we'll see the Wasteland force the issue. He's going after the black mana source. I think I would have gone for the second blue, but I'm not for sure. So I think a white mana was floated in response. We're gonna move to the combat step, and Chris just lets it go. Um, Fortunately for Josh, that Inkmoth Nexus is not providing any colored mana because I see he has a Spell Pierce, which could be useful, but he can't use like something like that and a Kicked Vines. Um, we have a main phase, Brainstorm. Wonder why this is happening after combat. You would think he would probably have played that pre-combat if he was looking for more pump spells or some way to force a close to this game. Now we all know that Chris is holding that Vendilion click, and well, right now he's walking it right into a daze, which if Chris is willing to fight over is, you know, is fine. Although I think it's unlikely, yeah. And we may see a fight now as Chris doesn't have a land drop to make, and he kind of needs to be proactive. Now he has the option of Council's Judgment or Swords to Plowshares. Um, and under most circumstances, you would prefer to use the Council's Judgment because it's the sorcery speed spell and it can't stop or it can't get an Inkmoth Nexus. The problem is that taps him out, and a spell like Flusterstorm or Spell Pierce just gets you. Now it does get around something like Vines of Astwood if that's Chris's response. Is Josh's response. So really, Josh has all the angles here, and Chris needs the info. That Vendilion click would have been very important for Chris to resolve. And this is where I think we're going to see the Spell Pierce uh, do some work, and Chris is going to have to decide does he want to fight over this and potentially risk um, walking into more dazes and Force of Wills of Josh's or or not. It appears Chris does not, and and back to Josh we go, who replays his land. I think if there was ever a time to try and go for it, this is it. That flurry of pump spells isn't going to get any better than a tapped out opponent. And even if you don't have permission, Brainstorm, personally I think is a little greedy. He's already made his land drop, so you can't kick a Vines now, and a kicked Vines is as good as any other pump spell in this deck, especially when you know what one of the cards on top of your or at least one, maybe two of the cards on top of your library were because you haven't shuffled since the last Brainstorm. I think, like I said, I would have preferred to see just a go for it fight, and if Chris has Force of Wills, let him burn through his hand trying to protect himself. any combination of 2 pump spells is lethal. So if you have 2 or 3 of them, that just does it all. But Josh opts to just attack for 1, and not taking the advantage now while he's got it to use those pump spells. Now, we know that Chris has a triple set of Force of Wills, so Josh would have a hard time winning a fight over some of those spells, but I don't know. I think Infect, the longer you go against a deck like Esper Stoneblade, the harder it's going to be to win. You kind of have to put the screws to them and make it happen early. If you wait too long, you're just gonna let them sculpt a perfect hand, and you lose a little too much of your edge. Now, Josh is a little fortunate in that Chris hasn't hit a land drop for the last 2 turns, and some of those cards, like I believe he's afraid of running his True Name Nemesis into another Daze or something of that nature. Looks like Josh has another Brainstorm in hand and a crop rotation. Josh comes in. Wonder if he's willing to pull the trigger yet on any of these spells. Now I think is actually a very dangerous time to go for it. You only have 1 Invigorate and 1 Vine, so really you only have 1 piece of protection, and it would probably just be better to... so Josh is going for a crop rotation post-combat. Now, part of the condition for casting crop rotation is you have to sacrifice a land, which I assume he's choosing he's choosing the tropical island there, since he's sort of indicated that with the way he played it by laying it on top of the crop rotation. Yeah, and there we have the Force of Will targeting the crop rotation. We'll see if a fight ensues, or it looks like he's just going to let that happen. I can't say I'm a huge fan of that either, actually. Just too many missed opportunities. Also worth noting here that Chris has not yet used that Swords to Plowshares we knew about from before. So if Josh ever got too aggressive, he would likely run into that and lose the fight over it. That said, Chris is only 1 attack away from 5 poison, and at 5, every pump spell is lethal. So now let's see if a fight happens over this. I feel like we're going to see a Brainstorm, and if Chris is willing to fight over that. Now, what is likely to happen here is that the Jace will -1 targeting the Blighted Agent, and send it back to Josh's hand, so that Josh is forced to make his combat steps through the Inkmoth Nexus. Yep, and there we have it. So back to Josh. He's going to draw one of those cards that we knew about. Now, this would be a good spot to pick a fight if you have a permission spell. Chris is tapped down. Looks like he is opting simply to recast his Blighted Agent and probably hold up a Vines of Vastwood to try and guarantee it doesn't get bounced next turn. Unfortunately, I think the bouncing is not going to be what happens. Although it might, we'll see. I think it's more likely that Chris will Brainstorm with the Jace, looking to like secure a perfect hand and then get rid of the Blighted Agent at his leisure. But first, a Brainstorm. I'm sorry, a Ponder. And there you have it. The Stoneforge Mystic. That's a tough one for the Infect deck to deal with. Um, because now Chris is able to force the issue on this pump spell, or this Vines of Astwood, excuse me, as Chris finds GT with the Stoneforge Mystic, and this Vines of Astwood will protect the Blighted Agent from the from the activate, or the the Jace +1 or -1. Sorry. Looks as though it's going to resolve, given that we now have a Swords to Plowshares as backup for Kucera. Swords to Plowshares plus a pair of Force of Wills, I think. Well, it looks like only one Force of Will. I'm sorry. Unfortunately, Josh, he does not have lethal with just the Blighted Agent. He would need one more damage before that Invigorate will make it lethal. Ah, but a Become Immense. Now that is lethal. That was a good draw. Chris is almost certainly going to have to fight over this. Unfortunately, I think a lot of our problems here in this match are going to stem back to that main phase crop rotation, which seemingly had no real target or no real purpose. Now, if Josh has something like a pair of Invigorates, but I don't believe he does. I think his hand is simply Glistener Elf and Invigorate. Now he should be playing out this Glistener Elf, I think. Looks like he isn't going to, and I think this is gonna be problematic for him, as the GT represents a way to kill off his creatures. Now, if he has a Vine still, I think he does. Josh can use Vines of Vastwood defensively to prevent GT from equipping. So we'll see what he's able to dig up. Now, a Brainstorm from Jace finds a fetch land, and Chris now has he has a spare blue card to fight with his Force of Will, and I think that's going to be the game most likely here. This is not the fight to fight. Unless Chris thinks that, or unless Josh thinks that he can beat the GT. Of course, Chris still has to commit. He can't wait on the GT and try and play around Force of Will or something. He's going to have to cast it here if he wants to make this resolve. Yep, so cast the GT. He should be equipping it here. A little bit of a misplay there. I think it would have been safer to fetch before you ever cast anything to play around a potential stifle. Sometimes the Infect lists play that as a one of. Here's where things start to get hairy. As the GT will long term be a problem. And actually, this Force of Will that Kucera now has is straight value, I think, as he doesn't even have to use it until something threatens either his GT or the creature wearing it. And Josh is going to be squeezed out of this game, I think, by that equipment alone. I think Moth is animated, and we have an attack for 2. Let's see. Not sure what the remaining cards in Josh's hand are. I know he has the Invigorate that he's been holding for a while now. One of them is also a Glistener Elf that we saw and he chose not to play last turn. This is a dangerous move, though. Your opponent's only at 7 poison, and the GT could potentially just lock this game out, starting right now. Now, the Infect deck, he does have a one of Viridian Corruptor main deck that can answer the GT. Unfortunately, the Viridian Corruptor is not going to be able to resolve. And there goes both of Josh's creatures. And this will be another attack with the Stoneforge just as soon as Chris is done brainstorming with his Jace the Mind Sculptor. Looks like he found another. I think it's another Swords to Plowshares. So, oh no, it's a Batterskull. Excuse me. Batterskull not at its best in this matchup. Although it looks like Chris is going to, he's going to use the Stoneforge to put the Batterskull into play. I don't know that that's necessary. I think it might be slightly overkill. Josh is fetching. Just another. I don't know if I like this. I think you would prefer to hold on to that fetch until you have a brainstorm, unless maybe he has Viridian Corruptor in hand, which is going to get Force of Willed here. Probably hard cast. Nope, he's exiling the Snapcaster Mage, and that should put the nail in the coffin because now Josh has no more outs to a GT. A Corruptor would have been the answer though, and perhaps if Josh had played his pump spells earlier and forced the issue to use up some of those Force of Wills, that Corruptor could have resolved here. But now I think there's no chance. Once the GT counters accumulate, there's no answer main board. Now in his sideboard, Josh will have Croson Grip and a and he's packing him in. He knows he's beat. I was gonna say Josh should have a Seal of Primordium as well. Yeah, so let's have a look at the sideboards while we're talking about it. I'll start with Josh's. He's got 1 Grafdigger's Cage, 1 Pithing Needle, 1 Sylvan Library, 1 Sylvan Safekeeper, 1 Savannah, 3 Rest in Peace, 3 Swords to Plowshares, 1 Force of Will, 1 Seal of Primordium, 1 Flusterstorm, and 1 Croson Grip. So I think in this matchup, because it's primarily going to be fights over permission and removal, and then the equipment, Josh probably wants something like the Flusterstorm, the Crosan Grip, the extra Force of Will is good, and then additionally you could consider bringing in Seal of Primordium, Sylvan Safekeeper, and Sylvan Library. All 3 of those, if the games are going to go long, really help sort of gain an advantage and stay ahead of the Stoneblade player. As for what to bring out, probably not sure. Most of the cards from your main deck are actually pretty solid. I think you could justifiably take out the crop rotation. There's not really anything you need to get with it. And probably with that, take out the basic forest, as Esper Stoneblade is not trying to waste block you or anything like that, and Infect can pretty easily run on 18 land. So that could free up 2 slots. Additionally, you could consider cutting like one of the Gitaxian probes, and maybe one of the noble hierarchs, as you, they'll just get caught up in some of the other sweepers like Supreme Verdict and stuff, and they're just, I mean, they help with velocity, but really you're trying to just have a quick combo kill. On Kucera's side, his sideboard has one Dark Blast, two Disenchants, two Ethersworn Canonists, a Flusterstorm, an Invasive Surgery, a Manriki Gusari, a Nahiri the Lithomancer, a Containment Priest, a Perish, a Rest in Peace, and two Zealous Persecutions. Now, out of these cards, there are some definite winners. Dark Blast is awesome against the Infect deck. It kills all the creatures much the same way GT does, and it's just a recursive spell. So that one I think should definitely come in. The two Ethersworn Canonists are actually pretty solid here, as Infect is sort of priced into a tempo velocity game where you got to cast a lot of spells, and Ethersworn Canonist slows that down. Flusterstorm is great for winning the counterspell fight. Um, and two Zealous Persecutions are both really good as just 2 mana wraths that deal with all of your opponent's creatures. Um, Chris should be looking at taking out probably the one of Batterskull, the Council's Judgment, as that's a really slow one. The one Intuition, again, it's really slow. Um, Probably doesn't need the two True Name Nemesis, and you could make an argument that something like Spell Snare or Counterspell is actually Spell Snare is really bad too. I would consider cutting all of those. True Names, Spell Snare, Intuition, maybe Counterspell, Council's Judgment, and Batterskull. Make room for all those other leaner, more efficient spells. So now that we've discussed sideboards and my thoughts on how you should sideboard and what you should change in your deck, let's talk briefly about Legacy's Allure. It is a webcast, podcast that MTG Training Grounds produces, featuring uh, pro players or at least Star City Open regulars who are sort of the masters of their deck, and it is all exclusively about the Legacy format and Legacy decks. So if you want to learn about some of these decks that we've showcased today, like Eldrazi, Infect, lands, some of those miracles, check out that podcast on our YouTube page. It is or the webcast, sorry, on the YouTube page. Just search for the channel MTG Training Grounds, and it will be one of the playlists there. There's a lot of great information. Most of these players built their careers in Legacy playing the decks that they showcase, and they are incredibly knowledgeable. They know exactly what they're doing and how to win with those decks, and you can learn a thing or two also. So check that out. Now, speaking of checking it out, let's see what Josh has got here. Looks like a hand that is missing a land. Now he has a scry and a rebuy with that Gitaxian probe. Oh no, he does have one land. I take that back. So he's choosing to keep it because Gitaxian probe, um, excuse me, Gitaxian probe will draw it before he has to shuffle away anything with his fetch land. And he sees a hand of engineered explosives, two swords to plowshares, two fetch lands, a Stoneforge Mystic, and a Force of Will, a naked Force of Will. Worth noting, there is no second blue card to pitch to it, so um, any fast combo out of Josh is relatively safe. Chris leads off with a fetch land as well. Now it's interesting there. Josh chose not to crack his fetch land and deploy his. I think I saw a Glistener Elf, uh, presumably because he doesn't have a daze or something to protect it with. But I think that's the kind of thing I'd be willing to challenge Chris on. Say, because the threat of the days is sometimes even more important than the actual days. But we'll see. I can't tell all of what's in Josh's hand, and he may not be may not trying to bluff. He just wants to play an honest game with actual permission up to keep his creatures safe. We'll see. Now, if if he does have a daze, Chris is walking face first into it. And we're going to see a Vines of Vastwood used defensively to keep this Glistener Elf alive. That's a safe line. Now we see sort of the downside to Chris fetching a basic. He has a brainstorm and a plains won't cast it, so he can't make it a perfect brainstorm. Not this turn anyway. Now it's possible that he doesn't need to, or isn't worried about that. He's content to just keep the Force of Will handy and fight later. We'll see. Josh draws for his turn. A good one in brainstorm. Chooses to play his land drop of, I believe that was a Verdant Catacombs, some sort of fetch land. Glistener Elf is into the red zone, dealing 1 damage, poisoning the opponents. And maybe Josh wants to deploy his second creature in Blighted Agent. See, Chris may have an end to turn Swords to Plowshares here, which I believe is going to resolve as Josh's hand consists of nothing but a crop rotation and an invigorate. Now, Chris is out of removal. I take that back. He just drew a brainstorm. Chris is sitting pretty with removal. And here comes the Stoneforge Mystic, which is problematic for Josh. See if he has a response here. I imagine he does not. Now, if this is going to be a brainstorm digging for a blue card and a Force of Will, I think Josh is maybe pressing his luck a little bit. There are Infect typically plays about 19 or 20 blue spells, and Brainstorm is one of them. So if you're utilizing that to try and dig for a second blue spell and a Force of Will, Force of Will and a blue spell, you may be disappointed. Well, there's the blue spell, but not the rest. Looks like there's a Become Immense as well, and another fetch land. So none of these things are really what Josh is looking for. Now, if Josh is able to find himself some permission to go with all of this, he could actually threaten to kill just this turn, and we'll see if Chris is willing to make a block. Now, Josh should know that Chris likely still has that Force of Will that we saw earlier. It's just the question of whether he's found a second blue spell or not. Now, granted, the Gitaxian Probe in Josh's hand would let him know that the coast is indeed not clear, but we'll see what he chooses to do here. I think if he's going to do anything, he should crop rotation first to change the top card of his library, as he doesn't want to draw into that fetch land. And he could go tutor up something like a Pendelhaven, which would force the issue on the Glistener Elf if the Stoneforge Mystic tries to block. We'll see. Josh is hesitant to pull the trigger on this, and as well he should be. He doesn't know that Chris drew another Swords to Plowshares, but he does know that Chris has at least one Force of Will, or likely has one Force of Will. Like I said, I think if anything is going to happen, Chris or Josh should consider playing the crop rotation first, just to change the top card of his library so that Gitaxian Probe is live. We've got a crop rotation. Now this is after an attack. Now, like we mentioned before, the infect play, the crop rotation part of the casting cost is choosing and sacrificing a land. You don't get to you don't get to hold off on that one. Now Pendelhaven was the decision, and Chris is fine letting his Stoneforge Mystic die. So the post-combat Gitaxian probe, that's not as common. Now I think this is because of using the crop rotation, like we mentioned like we mentioned earlier. We will see what he draws. Chris opting to play around um, Daze or Spell Pierce by waiting till his own turn to use the Sword Splashers, and this shows a lot of restraint on Kucera's part. This is not the type of matchup where you want to be too impulsive. You have to be proactive, but you can't get impatient. And a Thoughtseize is a good draw for the Stoneblade player. He reveals Become Immense and Glistener Elf. I guess Glistener Elf was the draw off of Gitaxian Probe. It is what he's going to take, and then I think the Plow here we're going to see take care of the the other Glistener Elf. And now Chris is in firm control with respect to the board state. He has a Swords to Plowshares in hand, or I mean not a Swords, a Force of Will in hand, and Josh is probably drawn somewhat dead. And just like that, he draws the best card he could have found in Inkmoth Nexus. Chris's draw is a Jace the Mind Sculptor, which he does not have the mana to play. Um, but perhaps, he's just going to deploy his GT in preparation for the future, and we will see what Josh's draw is. Now, Josh knows about the Force of Will now. So, Noble Hierarch is the play. It's not the card you would normally Force of Will, but it does represent an increased clock here, as as Josh will be able to attack for 3 a turn instead of just 2, cutting it down to a 3-turn clock instead of just a 2-turn clock. It also represents extra mana, which is and there we have it. The Exalted Trigger plus the +1/2 from the Pendelhaven makes it a 3-point attack, and Chris is now pressed into trying to find a creature. Now, a land draw is not a creature, but it is probably the next best thing in the world's largest planeswalker, or the best planeswalker at least. And a Lingering Souls means Chris now has one turn, or I mean, sorry, Josh has one turn about to come up with a really good solution. The ideal draw in this scenario would be a Berserk. Berserk is simply lethal no matter what. Believe the draw was a Daze. And actually, Daze is lethal. If Josh is willing to pull the trigger here, the game is just over. He attacks for 2 and pumps it, and then he can Become Immense his creature. I think that there is no better time than right now to try and go for it. If Josh misses this window, I think the Lingering Souls will be more than enough to seal the game and take away Josh's chance. He has to go for the pump spell now. Yep. And he chooses to. Chris fires off the Force of Will as he has to prevent dying. And the daze drawn for the turn should do it. Oh, it was not a daze. I'm sorry. I think it was a Force of Will. I saw the coloration. I assumed it was a daze. And I misspoke. That is my fault. On that note, we have a problem, as the GT is once again going to go live and make everything miserable for the Infect player. That land plus the Lingering Souls tokens is more than enough. Unless Josh can draw something like a Berserk in the next turn. Lingering Souls will provide Chris with 2 Spirit tokens. We'll see what Josh finds. Yeah, it was a Force of Will. I apologize. I don't know what the draw was. Looks like it might have been another Glistener Elf. And that's problematic. Now, Josh can attack here and sort of force the issue, make one of the tokens block, but he can't get rid of both. And unless Josh can quickly find the Viridian Corruptor to deal with that GT, I think again we'll see a repeat of what we saw in the last game. Looks like Josh is just going to have to send the turn back a little empty-handed and defeated. Looks as though Josh is debating whether he should play that Glistener Elf. At this point, I think it's probably not the correct decision. It would be better to sit back and hope for a Brainstorm that you can then get rid of that elf with, but he opts to play it. Yep. Sorry if I got anybody's hopes up there. Mine got a little burst of enthusiasm when I saw what I thought was a daze, but a Force of Will is not enough, and I think the window is quickly closing on the Infect player here for viable outs to this GT. Now, Chris also has to weigh the option here of holding. I believe he has a Snapcaster Mage, which represents another another removal spell, which is probably just better. Having a removal spell and a GT with counters is pretty solid against this board. I believe I may have seen a Perish in Chris's hand. I wonder if he brought that in. I see a Dark Blight. No, I think that is a Perish. Perish destroys all green creatures. It's a black and 2, I think, and I think it's also a cantrip. Sort of a very specific targeted hate card. I imagine that has somewhat to do with the metagame he expects. Yep, and there it is. Perish will kill all green creatures, or destroy all green creatures, excuse me. And Chris, maybe it doesn't draw a card, but it does destroy all green creatures. That part I'm sure of. So here's the GT equip and the attack. Now, actually, once again, I think Chris has left himself. Nope, he's not vulnerable. He has a Snapcaster Mage with a Force of Will. There's no live draws here, other than maybe Croson Grip. Croson Grip would lock up, killing the GT. That still isn't sufficient damage to finish the game, but it would be an out to the GT. And I'm assuming Josh brought that in. Certainly hope so. It's one of the most important cards in this matchup, I think. Chris fetches end step to reset the top of his library, and I believe his Jace the Mind Sculptor is going to brainstorm again, find him some saucy toys. Looks like a Thoughtseize, a Brainstorm, Stoneforge Mystic, and a Dark Blast. Yeah, this this game's just about over too. There's just a few too many things for Josh to try and fight through. That Jace has brainstormed at least 2 or 3 times now, maybe 3. Yep, that was the Force of Will we saw earlier. If only it had been the days. But it looks as though this GT is going to 4 counters. And we'll see a flashback of Lingering Souls, 2 more Spirit Tokens, Infinity Blockers. That combined with Dark Blast, pretty much takes all the wind out of Josh's sails. Chris fetches again, this time to reset the top of his library such that Jace can presumably brainstorm again and find even more hotness. Chris finds an arbitrary number of lands, 7 mana at this point. We will see what his draw step yields. Looks like a Zealous Persecution, as if things weren't bad enough. Chris attacks for 2. Could probably speed up his clock a little bit by taking some counters off of that GT. Now he's going the Fate Seal route to prevent Josh from drawing into any action. Looks like it wasn't anything all that good, and sends it back. That looks like a second Zealous Persecution. I think Chris is probably just doing the math to see if he can finish the game this turn. He's going to remove all but 1 counter. So that is an attack for 10, 11, 12 damage. I think Josh might only be at so Chris is, before blockers, pumping up his creature, sort of baiting Josh into a required response. Force of Will, Dark Blast, all sorts of shenanigans, and Josh Burgoa packs it in. He is defeated 2-0 by Christopher Kucera. Chris Kucera advances to the finals. We will be back in just a little bit with that finals match, so stick around.